This is the video where you're going to learn everything that you need to know about your DJI Pocket camera gimbal. The DJI Pocket 3 is a big step up from the previous versions. The camera has a much higher dynamic range and is also able to shoot 10-bit color video. But there are a number of new features which can be a little bit confusing, so I'm here to clear all that up for you. I'm going to explain how to get the best quality video from this camera and explain how to do some tricky things like how to lock focus and also how to use the new FPV mode. So I'm using the Pocket 3 Creator Combo, but there's not too much difference in how the different versions operate and what you can achieve. So if you just bought your Pocket 3 and you're getting set up, then the next section is for you. If you've already set up and you've had a little bit of experience using it already, then you can skip to the next part. If you purchase the Creator Combo, like me, your box arrives with all kinds of extras. And at first it might look a bit intimidating. So the best thing is to make yourself your favorite drink and give yourself a little bit of time to work through this. So what do we get with the Creator Combo? Of course, there's the Pocket 3 main body and camera itself. There's a handle with a 1/4-inch tripod thread, and we also have the longer battery handle. We've got this wide-angle lens which mounts magnetically, and it gives us a wider action camera style view. We have a protective cover which has spaces to store the wide-angle lens as well as a black mist filter. Sadly, the black mist filter does not come with the Creator Combo set, but we do get a DJI wireless microphone transmitter which connects to the camera using Bluetooth, plus a magnet which you can use to clip the mic onto your clothes. We have a mini tripod, a wrist strap, a windshield for the mic, and it's also a nice little carry bag to store it all in. With the Pocket 2 Creator Combo, we had to buy our own, so that is a nice little bonus. As well as the Creator Combo set, I also bought some K&F ND filters, as well as 2 K&F black mist filters. I'm going to cover all these little extras as I go through the video. Let's go through getting your Pocket 3 into shape and ready to record video. You're going to need a microSD card and the DJI Mimo app installed on your phone. The Pocket 3 does not come with internal memory, so like with action cameras, you're going to need to install a microSD card. It just goes in the slot on the side with the metal contacts facing towards the front of the camera. And there's no hatch or anything like that, so that actually tells you that this camera is in no way water resistant. If you did want to use this in wet conditions or you wanted to take it underwater, you're going to need to get a waterproof case. And you can actually find them in places like AliExpress or Amazon. And I'll actually add some links in the description, although bear in mind I haven't actually tested any of them. I already have the DJI Mimo app on my phone, but if you don't, then you may as well get that downloaded and installed. You will need the Mimo app to activate the Pocket camera. But apart from that, you can also use it to control the Pocket and get a bigger screen to look at as well. If you have an iPhone, the Mimo app is in the usual place. But if you're using an Android phone, you won't find the Mimo app in the Play Store. You're going to need to download it from the DJI website and then sideload it onto your phone. From what I understand, not all Android phones are compatible with the Mimo app. So that's something for you to look into, but I think all those kind of major devices are compatible. Anyway, I'll put a link to the download page in the description. But once you have the Mimo app installed, you'll need to be logged in to activate the Pocket 3. Basically, you need to have an account. Once you're through all that, you'll most likely be prompted to install some firmware. So I recommend that you always have the latest firmware, so just go ahead and do that now. To charge the Pocket 3, you just use the USB-C cable as provided and a compatible charger. Then connect to the USB-C port. The Pocket 3 is actually capable of fast charging, but if you want to do that, you're going to need to use a charger that supports fast charging as well as a cable that supports it. So the cable that comes with the Pocket 3 is capable of fast charging. And for example, if your phone has fast charging, then you should be able to use that charger and get your Pocket 3 fast charging. And when you use fast charging, the Pocket 3 charges very quickly. I haven't actually timed it myself, but it does seem to go pretty quick. DJI says it takes about 16 minutes to go from 0 to 80% and about double that for 100%. Now there's actually two ways to power on the Pocket 3. Either long press the record button or twist the screen 90 degrees. To power off, long press the record button or twist the screen so that it's vertical again. And when you do that, you get this countdown and then the camera powers off. And the reason it does that is that twisting the screen also switches the camera between horizontal and vertical video. So basically what it's doing is asking you, do you want to power off or do you want to continue shooting vertical video? Now you might actually prefer to change the way this works, and you can actually do that, but we're going to talk about that later. So by default, when you power on, the camera faces away from you, but you can actually change that in the settings. Swipe down and tap the settings cog, tap Gimbal Startup Direction, and you can now choose from three options: forward, backward or selfie, and last setting. So if you choose last setting, the camera will face whichever way it was facing when you powered off. Notice that when you move, the camera eases in and out of the movement. The camera doesn't move exactly as you move, rather it slowly speeds up, so it's behind your movement, and then it kind of eventually catches up. And as well, when you stop moving, the camera doesn't just stop, it slows to a stop. You know, some users sometimes think that this is a design flaw, but it actually isn't. This is designed to act like this because it gives you smoother, more cinematic camera movements. So I do recommend that before you go any further, it's a good idea just to spend a little moment playing around with this. Just get a feel for it, because you're going to want to incorporate this into your camera movements when you're filming. You know, the reason you bought this is for the movement. And if you're not using the movement, then there's not really much point in using the Pocket 3. So apart from the rotating touchscreen, at least on the surface, the Pocket 3 is somewhat simpler than the Pocket 2. All we have here is the control stick on the left, which DJI calls the 5D joystick, and then there's the record or power button on the right, and that's basically it. There's no other buttons. The three small holes on the back and sides of the Pocket 3 are microphones, and below the screen is the Pocket 3's speaker. To the right of the front panel we have the holes, and therefore attaching the wrist strap. At the bottom we have the USB-C port, and that's for charging and also for connecting the Pocket 3 to another device. For example, transferring media files to your computer. The Pocket 3 is of course a 3-axis gimbal, so we have 3 motors on the pan, roll and tilt axis. If you're familiar with the DJI action cameras, you're going to feel pretty comfortable using this touchscreen. Some items on the screen can be tapped to show more information, and some can be tapped to open settings, and others don't do anything when you tap them. As well, we can access certain features and modes and settings by swiping. So let's go through it. Tap the icon in the bottom left corner to open up the shooting mode picker. Choose a shooting mode and then either tap again to close or wait a couple of seconds and it's going to close itself. The icon now changes to whatever you just switched to. So in this case, low light mode. If you tap the battery icon in the top right corner, that shows the remaining battery as a percentage. Tap the rotate button and that's going to switch the direction of the camera, and it will rotate 180 degrees to face towards you or away from you. Tap the icon in the middle on the left, and that's going to open up an interesting feature, which is the smart gimbal mode settings. So there's lots of exciting stuff to go through here, and I'm going to go through it all during this video. So when you tap the icon in the middle on the right of the screen, you change what pushing the joystick up and down does. So by default, it tilts the camera. When you tap this button, you change that to digital zoom, and that can go up to 2 times magnification. And you can actually reverse this in the settings, so you can have it the other way around, and by default it will zoom and then you tap it to tilt up and down. So the other way to access the features and settings of the Pocket 3 is to swipe from the edge of the screen. So you can swipe up, down, left or right, all 4 directions, and that's going to open up various options and menus. Swipe up to open quality settings. So we've got resolution, we've got frame rate, aspect ratio, or you get megapixels for photos. So basically you're going to get different settings depending on which mode you're in and whether you're shooting vertical or horizontal video. Swipe right to open up the gallery of the captured media. Swipe down to open more options, including the cog for lots more settings. Swipe left to open Pro mode, and that gives you manual exposure and manual white balance options. And there's a lot of other settings here as well. So we're going to go through all that as we go along. Normally with these kind of cameras, like action cameras, we don't worry about focus too much because everything is in focus unless it's too close. But with the Pocket 3, focus adjusts automatically, a bit like with a smartphone. So you're going to see the focus changing. And this can make getting things in focus a little bit more tricky depending on the shot. When you tap the screen, a yellow square appears. And this is basically an indicator for exposure and focus. Just like with a smartphone, the camera will set exposure and focus for the area where you tap. So once it's set, you're going to see the yellow square go darker. And that tells you that the exposure and focus are temporarily locked. By default, as soon as you move the camera, autofocus and exposure kicks in again. But there are ways to lock exposure as well as focus. And that is something that we're going to go into later. The 5D joystick can move the camera on the tilt and pan axes. Aside from that, you can press the 5D joystick down like a button. If you've used a smartphone gimbal, you might notice that pressing the joystick acts like pressing the trigger on a gimbal. So press twice to recenter. Now this is really important to remember because you're going to be using this a lot. And it also plays an important role in a new gimbal mode, but I'm going to explain that later. And if you press it 3 times, you will switch the camera direction so it rotates 180 degrees. And finally, if you want to go into locked mode, then you just press and hold the joystick. In lock mode, it's not going to follow any of your movements. So the camera just keeps facing the same direction, but it only does that while you hold down the joystick. As soon as you release the pressure, the Pocket 3 goes back into whatever mode that you had it in before. While the controls on the gimbal are nice and simple, once you look under the hood, things do get a little bit more complicated. But this is a powerful video creation tool, so I recommend that you keep watching this video if you want to get the most from it. The Pocket 3 has many different modes, and those modes come under 3 headings. We've got shooting modes, gimbal modes, and smart gimbal modes. Shooting modes allow you to change the type of media that you want to capture. We have panorama, photo, video, low light video, slow motion video, and finally we have time-lapse video. And whichever mode you select, when you swipe up from the bottom, you'll find settings for that particular mode. And of course, the mode that we're going to be using most of the time is video mode. In video mode, the Pocket 3 can shoot up to 60 frames per second at 4K resolution. And if you want to shoot above 60 frames per second, you're going to need to switch to slow-mo mode. In slow mode, we now get the option to shoot 100 frames per second, as well as 120 frames per second at 4K. At 2.7K, we only get 120 frames per second. And at 1080p, we get the option to shoot 240 frames per second. In slow mode, 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second video is going to be converted to 30 frames per second. Whereas when you shoot 60 frames per second in the previous mode, you only get the 60 frames per second video. So it's converting it for you, it's a bit more convenient. And by the way, when you record slow motion video, the final video is without sound. But actually, the Pocket 3 does record sound and then saves it as a separate audio file. And this audio is not slowed down, so therefore it's not actually going to match the video unless you slow it yourself by the same amount. DJI says that in low light mode, the Pocket 3 will automatically adjust exposure parameters intelligently to improve image quality in low light environments. So this setting does seem to work pretty well, but what does it actually do? So my guess is that it boosts the ISO and at the same time adds some extra noise reduction, which is going to remove any resulting grain that you get from the ISO increase. So you might get better looking video, but it could be at the expense of some loss of detail. Now the Pocket 3 allows you to save certain settings as a preset, and then you can easily return to those settings. And here's how you do it. First, set your Pocket 3 to the settings that you want to remember. Here I have input film look settings, so that's 4K video, 24 frames per second, manual exposure with a 150 shutter speed and a manual white balance setting. And as well, I'm going to use the D-Log M to give myself more options when color grading. Swipe down and tap the custom mode button. Now tap the plus button and you're going to see the settings that it's going to save displayed, and it's going to be saving this group of settings as C1. Tap confirm, and in the main screen you're going to see the mode button now says C1. So if we tap that, we find that C1 is now added to the list of modes so that we can choose it along with the other modes. And you can use this for anything, favorite photo settings or time-lapse settings and so on. And if you want to delete a saved setting, go back to the custom mode screen, navigate to the setting to delete, and then just tap the trash button. I'll talk more about the lesser used modes later, so let's move on and talk about gimbal modes. Gimbal modes are exactly what they sound like, generally the same modes that you get in a gimbal for cameras or for smartphones. Swipe down to open more settings and you'll find the gimbal mode button in the bottom right corner. Tap to choose, and with the new update we now have 4 modes. We've got follow, tilt locked, FPV and FPV locked. Or here it says FPV and then there's like an upside down T next to it. And I think that symbol is just about as confusing as the mode itself. However, I do now understand it. So let's talk about the modes. Follow mode follows your movement when you pan left or right and when you tilt backwards and forwards, but it doesn't follow your movement if you roll the camera. And this mode is the most natural mode. It's most similar to how we view the world. We look left and right or up and down, but we don't often look at things sideways, and that's why in follow mode the gimbal tries to keep the camera level with the horizon. And this mode is a useful all-purpose mode. For example, if you're filming a travel video and you want the freedom to have the camera explore the surroundings, maybe there's a tall building and you want to be able to approach and then tilt upwards to show it. Tilt lock mode follows your movement when you pan left or right, but does not follow your movement when you tilt backwards or forwards or when you roll the camera. In other words, it only follows your pan movement. Tilt lock mode is useful when you are filming a subject and you want the camera to remain focused on them. You don't want the camera to tilt up or down, so use this mode for any kind of tracking shot. FPV mode, or first person view, follows all your movements on the pan, tilt and roll axis. And this means that you can now shoot video where the camera turns against the horizon. And this is not how we would normally view the world. So when would we actually use this kind of shot? I would say FPV mode allows us to be more creative and to do something a bit unusual. We can create spin shots and shots with creative camera movements. When edited together, these kinds of shots can really grab the audience's attention. And now for this new mode, which was added with an update, and that's the FPV locked mode. Remember that I said double pressing the joystick recenters the gimbal and it's going to play an important role. Well, so in regular FPV mode, when you double press to recenter, the camera levels itself towards the horizon, and it doesn't matter which way you're holding the gimbal. Here I'm holding it at 45 degrees and the camera is facing downwards. Double tap, now the camera tilts so it's looking directly towards the horizon. Now let's switch to FPV locked mode. And again, I'll hold the gimbal at 45 degrees and then double tap. This time, the camera faces the same direction as the screen. Well, why is this useful? Well, I'd say it just makes the Pocket 3 more of a point and shoot camera. For example, if I aim at this flower, double press, boom, I'm ready to go. And then it's just aim at something else, double press, and straight away you're ready to go. It's really just helping you to aim and shoot, and it's just quicker. And if you try to do that in regular FPV mode, the camera is going to keep aiming at the horizon and not where you want it. Okay, yes, you can use the joystick, or you can move the gimbal and then just wait for the camera to catch up. It's just not as fast, and if you're trying to capture a spontaneous moment, and you want to make sure the camera is pointing in exactly the right direction, this mode is best for that kind of thing. If we tap the middle button, On the left of the screen, we can access the 3 smart gimbal modes. So 2 of these modes are to do with tracking a subject or an object, and the other one is for doing various kind of spin shots or barrel roll shots. The 3 modes are face auto detect, dynamic framing, and spin shot mode. To get face auto detect running, press start. And now you get a rectangular box in the middle of the screen. Press record and the camera will start searching for a face, and you will see that it says detecting here. As soon as the face moves within this rectangle, the camera locks onto that face and it will now move the camera to keep that face in frame. But this is actually different to the next mode because this mode keeps the subject in the center of the frame, whereas in the next mode you can choose. In dynamic framing mode, the camera detects and then tracks objects and then keeps them within a certain area of the frame. Press start and you will see these 9 boxes and a yellow box. So just use the joystick to place this yellow box where you want to keep the tracked subject. For example, let's say you want to track a person walking but you don't want them to be kept in the center of the frame. Instead, you want them to be to the left of the frame as they walk towards the right. So in that case, move the yellow box to the left, move the camera so the person is beneath the yellow box, and press the joystick once. The gimbal now starts tracking the person and tries to keep them in that left area of the frame. And to stop tracking, just press the joystick down once. If you've used a regular gimbal, you'll probably be familiar with the spin shot. The Pocket 3 gives you 2 options. Press the 90-degree button and then press the joystick once. Or you can tap the button on the screen. The camera rolls until it reaches a 45-degree slant. Press it again and the camera rolls back 90 degrees so that it's slanting the opposite way 45 degrees. Press the 180-degree button and the camera now faces upwards. And the idea is that you hold the Pocket 3 like a flashlight. Press the joystick once and the camera starts circling 180 degrees. And when you press it again, it will circle back the opposite way. And spin shots can be useful for B-roll, and they're also good for creating fun transitions. Now you can adjust how quickly the gimbal motors react to your movements. Swipe down and tap the button with the running figure. And you now have 3 speeds to choose from: slow, default, and fast. So you might want to change the speed depending on what you're filming. If you want really slow, graceful, cinematic movement, think about choosing slow. And if you're capturing more dramatic motion, like sports for example, you can think about choosing fast. The highest quality video is 4K when shooting landscape video and 3K when shooting portrait video. But if you don't need 4K, you can also choose 2.7K and 1080p. And for frame rates, we have 24, 25, 30, 48, 50, and 60 frames per second in the regular video mode. Swipe left and tap the image adjustment button and then switch it to custom. You now have 2 settings. We've got sharpness and noise reduction. And this is actually exactly the same as you're going to find in the DJI Osmo Action 4 camera. So there's no right or wrong setting here. How sharp your video looks is really a matter of taste. The thing is, we can add sharpness later, but it is actually harder to remove it. So you might want to go for less sharp image quality here when shooting, and then maybe add a little bit later. And when you're shooting in low light, perhaps you might find yourself having to increase ISO. And then you could end up with noisy video. So you can try adding a bit more noise reduction and see if that improves the quality. But the thing about noise reduction is that it actually removes some of the detail. So if you're in bright conditions, you might want to reduce the noise reduction to add more detail back into the image. Above the image adjustment button is a color button. Tap this to access different color profiles. D-Log-M is that washed out log profile. That's designed for a better color grading experience. HLG stands for Hybrid Log Gamma, and this mode records with a wide dynamic range and color gamut. So it's similar to Dolby Vision or HDR10. Unlike those formats, it can only be displayed on an HLG compatible TV or monitor. And as well, when you're editing this format of video, you do need to make sure that you set the editing program to the correct color space, or it's just going to look a bit weird. By default, the Pocket 3 shoots HEVC video, and that gives you a higher quality video with lower bitrate. So that means the files are smaller. As well, using this compression means that you get 10-bit color depth. Swipe down and tap the settings cog. Scroll until you find the video compression setting. Here you can switch between HEVC, otherwise known as H.265 or H.264. And if you find a platform where you want to upload video does not support HEVC, then you can switch to H.264. But this does mean that your video is going to be bigger, and it's also going to be in 8-bit color and not 10-bit color. To start tracking an object, double tap on that object on the touchscreen. A green box appears around the object, and your Pocket 3 is now going to try to keep that object in the middle of the frame. To stop tracking, press the joystick once, or just tap away from the green box on the touchscreen. And if the Pocket 3 loses track of the object it's tracking, the box here goes red. If you want the Pocket 3 to automatically detect a face and start tracking as soon as you have the camera facing you, you can set it to do that. Swipe down and tap the button in the top right corner. And with this enabled, you won't have to worry about keeping yourself in the frame for things like vlogging or just getting B-roll of yourself. Swipe right from the edge of the screen to access your media files and play back any videos. If your last capture was a video, it will automatically start playing. Just tap the screen to pause playback. Swipe up and down to go through all your media files. Now, if you find that you can't hear any sound, the audio is probably switched off. When the video is paused, in the top right corner is a volume button. But when the volume is switched off, it's actually grayed out, and that makes it difficult to see. But just tap in the corner and now you get a volume control on the bottom of the screen. And you can just slide your finger to adjust the playback volume. Tap the heart button, bottom right, to add the media to your favorites. Tap the 3 dots in the middle left and you can now choose to favorite or delete the file. And if you tap the I button, you get more info about the media. Tap the button top left to switch to thumbnail mode. And you can now see all your media files stored on the Pocket 3 as smaller thumbnails. And when you're in this mode, you can tap the check button top right, and now you can start selecting multiple files. And when you've chosen all the ones that you want to choose, you can then tap the 3 dots top right and favorite or delete all the selected files at once. So that's going to save you a little bit of time. If you want to shoot better videos or photos, then it's important to understand the dynamic range of your camera. When we talk about dynamic range, we're talking about a camera's ability to deal with varying light levels. The Pocket 3 has a much better dynamic range than the previous versions. And having a better dynamic range means the camera can now handle difficult light conditions better. But even so, as soon as I started using the Pocket 3, I found myself reaching for the manual exposure to get the look that I wanted. For example, here I was filming a sunrise, but the auto exposure made the image look too bright and I was losing the kind of rich colors of the sky. But once I set the exposure manually, I got a much better result. Another reason to set exposure manually is to lock it so that it doesn't adjust during the shot. It does take a little bit of extra time, but your shots will look more professional as a result. To set exposure manually, we're going to need to use Pro Mode. And Pro Mode gives us all kinds of manual controls to change the look of the video. To get to Pro Mode, swipe left from the edge of the screen and you will reveal this button called Pro. So just tap it to switch the Pocket 3 into Pro Mode and the Pro Mode button goes yellow. And once we switch the Pocket 3 into Pro Mode, we now have some new settings to use. Top left we have exposure and top right we have white balance. And by default exposure is set to auto. So let's tap that and open exposure settings. Now there's different methods that we can use to set exposure. Firstly, we can use the EV or exposure value setting. And to do this, swipe up and down on the left side of the screen. And what this does is leave the camera in auto exposure, but at the same time, it adjusts the image to be darker or brighter. Like for my sunrise scenario, the Pocket 3 was brightening the image too much, and I was losing the richness of the colors in the sky. So I changed the EV to about -1, and the image looked much better. On the right, we can set an ISO range. And the reason to use this is if we want the Pocket 3 to keep setting exposure automatically, but we don't want the Pocket 3 to push the ISO too high. Because if it sets the ISO too high, it's going to add digital noise, and that's going to degrade the quality of the video. So we can actually set the range as low as 50 to 100 ISO, which means the Pocket 3 is never going to go above 100 ISO. Or we can go all the way up to 50 to 6400, and the Pocket 3 is never going to go above 6400. But actually you can't anyway, because 50 is the lowest possible ISO setting and 6400 is the highest. So we can use the EV and the ISO range settings to keep our camera in auto, but adjust what the camera does, so control it a little bit. It's a bit like halfway between fully auto and fully manual. So now let's go fully manual. If we want to lock exposure completely at an exact setting, we need to switch to manual mode. So we just tap the M button to do that. On the left, we now have our shutter speed, and on the right, we have our ISO. Swipe up and down to get the setting that you want. Note that if you swipe down enough, you're going to get these ISO range settings again. So this means that you can set your shutter speed exactly, but you can keep your ISO in auto and then decide which range you want to keep it within. So there's a lot of flexibility for the way that you set exposure in this camera. In the top left corner, you're going to see an EV value. And if this is negative, the Pocket 3 is telling you that it thinks your image is underexposed, and if it's positive, then it's telling you that it thinks it's overexposed. But I would really take this as a guide and not something to follow slavishly. For example, when I shot that sunrise, the EV value was in the negative, but it looked better to me. The advantage of locked exposure is that you get less messy looking video, and less messy looking video is usually considered more professional. And of course, the disadvantage of locked exposure is that it cannot adapt to changes in light conditions in the frame as you move the camera. And if we're going to go to the trouble of locking exposure, we may as well lock white balance too. So in Pro mode, tap the white balance, and you can set it manually using a Kelvin number. The white balance will now be fixed, and it's not going to change during the shot. So when you have the exposure and white balance set how you want them, tap confirm to close the window. And in the main screen, you're now going to see this EV value that you should just use as a guide below the battery level. When we're filming in bright conditions, the shutter speed needs to be fast, otherwise there's going to be too much light hitting the sensor. But if we want smooth looking video, we actually need a slow shutter speed. If we can get the shutter speed below 1/100th of a second, the video is going to look smoother. But to do this in bright conditions, we're going to need to use some kind of ND filter. DJI, of course, sells their own branded ND filters for pocket gimbals, but you can also get third-party ND filters. These are some that I bought from Amazon, and they're about $30. They're by K&F, which is a pretty well-known brand, and I've used them before, so I sort of trust their quality. And also, to my surprise, included was this touchscreen guard, so that's a little bonus. So these ones are actually separate fixed strength ND filters. So I've got an ND4, an ND8, ND16 and ND32. But if you're working in very bright conditions and you really want to get your shutter speed down to 1/60th or 1/48th, then you might need to get stronger ones. You can get variable NDs for the Pocket 3, and K&F do variable NDs as well. But I do find that variable NDs can have variable quality. So personally, I prefer fixed strength. They mount very easily. They're magnetic, so you just pop them over the lens. And so now this allows me to reduce my shutter speed and shoot more smooth looking video in bright conditions. Now, if you look inside the protective cover that you get with the Pocket 3, you will find a place that you store your wide angle adapter, and there's another place that you can store a Black Pro Mist filter. So at first I got a little bit excited because I thought, maybe the Creator Combo comes with a Black Pro Mist. Sadly, no, it doesn't actually. So I went to purchase the official DJI Black Pro Mist, and it's like $45, and I thought that's a little bit expensive really. So instead I bought two K&F Black Pro Mist filters for the Pocket 3, and these ones are about $15 each. And I've got a half strength here and a quarter strength. So what do mist filters do? Well, they just give videos and photos a kind of dreamy look. and they can also help to soften the areas of the image where there is a high contrast between light and dark areas. For example, if you're inside during the day, a mist filter will add a little bit of a glow and softness around the windows. And at night, a mist filter is going to add a glow around lights, for example. Kind of makes your images a little bit more romantic, a little bit more like the film look as well, because for various reasons, film adds a kind of glow around lights, and it just looks more dreamy, doesn't it? When I first used the Pocket 3, I thought there's no way to lock focus, so you can tap the screen to set focus, but as soon as you move, the autofocus resets and the focus changes. But there is actually a way to lock focus, and this is how. Swipe left and make sure you're in Pro mode. Scroll down to the bottom left setting, which determines how the Pocket 3 sets focus. And if you switch this to single and then tap confirm, and when we tap the screen to set focus, you're going to see this yellow square. And after a second or so, it turns a darker color. And as I said earlier, this means it's now locked. So far, nothing different. But watch the square when I move the camera, because now it stays dark. And that means it's locked. Because when it goes yellow again, that means it's reset. So if you have this in auto mode, when you move the camera, it resets and it goes yellow. But you can see that no matter how much I move the camera, the focus remains locked. And if we want to set focus again, we can just tap the screen and then wait for the square to go darker again. And you can actually do this while you're recording, because maybe you want to switch focus onto a different subject during a shot, for example. So I think that's pretty cool that you can control focus that way. So once you've captured some videos and some photos, you're going to want to get them off the camera and onto your computer for editing. Or maybe you want to get them onto your smartphone because you're going to edit them there. There's actually 3 ways to transfer media from the Pocket 3, so let's go through them. Switch on the Pocket 3 and connect a USB cable between it and your computer. And a message is going to pop up. It's going to ask you to choose between file transfer and webcam. So you just tap the top one for transfer. But actually, if you leave it after a few seconds, it's going to automatically go into the transfer mode. So if you want to use it as a webcam, you need to be quick and tap that button. But you will now find the Pocket 3 as an external drive on your computer. And if you haven't named it before, it's going to be called Untitled. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to rename it as Pocket 3, and it will remember this name the next time that I connect the camera to my computer. Open it and then open the DCIM folder. And here you're going to find folders containing your media. And if you shot some video, you're going to find the video file and a corresponding LRF file. And that stands for low resolution file. So these LRF files are basically just for previewing video on your Pocket, and you don't need them for editing. Select the regular files and not the LRF files, and then drag them into a folder on your computer. Another way to transfer files is simply to remove the micro SD card from the Pocket 3 and then use a card reader for your computer. And finally, if you want to edit the files on your smartphone, then you can use the Mimo app to download the files from the Pocket 3. By default, when you rotate the screen, it powers on the gimbal. And when you rotate the screen back to its vertical position, it powers off. That's unless you stop it. But you can actually change the way this works in the settings. Swipe down from the top to open up extra settings. And the second button on the bottom row switches the camera between portrait and landscape. So here we've got 3 settings: landscape, portrait, and auto rotation. The default setting is auto rotation, and that means the setting is determined by rotating the screen. If you switch to portrait, you will get a vertical frame whichever way the screen is set. And as you can see in vertical format, like I say, you get a maximum of 3K video instead of 4K. And if you set this to landscape, you will get a horizontal frame whichever way the screen is set. Perhaps the most convenient setting is auto rotation, as you can easily switch between the formats simply by twisting the screen, and then you're going to get a full screen preview. But if you switch between formats a lot, then you might want to stop it from powering off every time, because that could get annoying, couldn't it? And this is how to do that. Swipe down and then tap the settings cog. Scroll down a little way until you find the setting rotate screen to power off. Tap that, and now you have 3 choices: now, 2 secs, and never. And if you switch this to now, as soon as you rotate the screen, it's going to immediately switch off. But if you switch between vertical and horizontal a lot, then you're probably going to want to choose never. And then when you want to power off, just long press the record button instead of rotating the screen. Swipe down and tap the button with the circle and the circular arrow. If you enable screen rotate and capture, the Pocket 3 is immediately going to start capturing video as soon as you rotate the screen, so you don't need to press record. So this setting allows you to power on and start shooting as fast as possible. And below you can decide what it captures when you do this. It's either going to be your last settings, or video, or low light, or hyperlapse. And so with this enabled, when you want to stop recording, you can long press the record button or rotate the screen again. To mount your Pocket 3 to a tripod, you're going to need to add the handle extension with the 1/4 inch thread. The Creator Combo comes with 2 handle extensions, the basic small one and the longer one, which also contains a battery. So that's going to give you longer shooting time. And here's how to mount them. You're going to see that they both have a USB-C plug and a button at the front. And this button opens the catches. When you attach the extensions, you don't need to use this button. You just press it in until you hear the nice click sound. The catches of the extension now hook onto the grooves, which you can see at the bottom of the Pocket 3. So the button is really just for removing the extension. Just simply press in the button, the catches will release, and you can see them doing that. And then you just pull it to remove it. When I first attached the battery handle, it automatically updated the firmware, so definitely recommend that you let it do that. And by the way, with the battery handle attached, when you charge your Pocket 3, it's going to charge the main battery first and then the extra handle battery second. And then when you use the Pocket 3 with the extra battery, it's going to drain the handle battery first and then the main battery. So that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That's sort of logical. And when you power off the Pocket 3, you're going to see on the screen the status of each battery. Of course, you can actually charge the battery in the handle without attaching it to the Pocket 3. You just connect it to a USB-C charger as normal. So that's pretty useful if you want to carry on filming with the Pocket 3 while you're charging up the extra battery. So with the handle extension added, you can now use the 1/4 inch thread, and you can attach it to the mini tripod that comes with the combo set. We can use any tripod that has a 1/4 inch thread. It's a standard size for tripods. So the good news is that the Pocket 3 can connect to wireless mics via Bluetooth. But the bad news is that it can only connect to the DJI Mic 2 transmitters. But I guess most people will be using the DJI Mic 2, and they are good mics. So let's go through how to use them. The DJI wireless mics have been very popular, and you might be familiar with the full setup where you get 2 transmitters and a receiver. The Pocket 3 Creator Combo comes with a single DJI Mic 2 transmitter, while the Pocket 3 itself acts as a receiver. If you purchase a second transmitter, you can now connect 2 mics to the Pocket 3. So the transmitter has an internal mic, or you can connect a mic to the transmitter using the 3.5mm port. And the transmitter just clips onto your clothes, and you can either use the spring clip or you can use the magnet which is included. And as well, the protective case has a place to clip it, so you can then use the case as a microphone grip. To connect a mic transmitter to your Pocket 3, simply long press the power button. After it powers on, it should automatically connect to the Pocket 3, and then you will get a notification. As well, you should see a green audio level across the top of the screen. So if I long press the connection button below the blue light, the mic disconnects and the blue light now starts flashing, and this is to indicate that it's no longer connected. Swipe down and tap the settings cog. At the top, we have wireless mic settings. Tap and you're going to see places for 2 mics, TX1 and TX2. Now, at this moment, I have my DJI mic switched off, and that's why they're both empty. Tap the one that you want to connect to, either TX1 or TX2. Now, if I switch on the transmitter by long pressing the power button, and then press the connection button, the mic connects and you can see TX1 now shows a green audio level line. Now, if I press the other one, it waits for me to do the same with the second mic. But I actually only have 1 mic, so I can't show you them both connected. But this is how you do it if you have that extra mic and you want to record 2 people speaking at once. So in these 2 boxes are displayed the transmitter battery level on the left and the remaining audio space on the actual transmitter. And the reason you get that is because you can actually record audio directly to the transmitter if you want to use it as like a standalone recorder or to capture some backup audio. The Pocket 3 also has various wireless mic settings, so I'm just going to go through the important ones now. With the Mic 2 connected, swipe left to open the settings page, and now tap the little DJI mic button, which is next to the camera button. The first setting is gain, so just use the slider to increase or decrease the gain. Next to that button is a button which allows you to mute the microphone. Below those buttons is another button, and that allows you to switch noise reduction on or off. With one or two mics connected, swipe down and tap the settings cog, and now scroll down and you're going to see a list of settings and switches. To monitor the audio going into your Pocket 3, you can actually connect headphones via the USB-C port. So if you tap here, you're going to get this slider which you can then use to control the volume. Next one is to switch on or off the LED lights on the transmitter. By default, they're on, but if you'd rather have no lights, then you can switch them off here. And below that, you can switch on or off the transmitter vibration. So with this on, when you press the buttons, you get various different vibrating notifications. And I'm going to list those in the text version of this video, which you can access on my Patreon page for free. The audio to video sync is a little bit of a strangely worded setting, but basically, if this is switched on, the transmitter or transmitters are going to record audio onto the transmitter's internal storage at the same time as they're recording audio normally onto the Pocket 3. So you might want to switch this on if you want a backup recording in case something goes wrong. For example, like I say, if you walk out of range, the mics disconnect and then you lose the audio. But if this is switched off, audio is only going to be recorded as normal onto the video file of the Pocket 3. By default, the Pocket 3 records with a low cut filter. And what this does is remove audio frequencies below a certain level. And in this case, anything below 150 Hz is removed. So that just helps to remove unwanted noise, especially this kind of low noises like wind rumbling and that kind of stuff. With 32-bit float recording enabled, when you use the transmitter to record audio internally, it's going to record it as 32-bit float audio. What's the advantage of this 32-bit format? Well, it has a huge dynamic range if you compare it to normal audio formats. But the main reason to use it is just to protect yourself from audio overloading. So for example, if you have a speaker and they suddenly start shouting, or if you're standing next to a jet engine or something, then 32-bit float audio is going to be much less likely to overload and you get that sort of distortion sound and then the audio gets ruined. And 32-bit float can save you from that. The final setting here allows you to format the internal memory of the transmitter. So if you want to wipe the memory, formatting it is one way to do it. And as well, sometimes you get issues with corrupt audio files. I found that if you reformat the memory, then those issues can sometimes be fixed. But of course, remember that it's going to delete any stored files at the same time. So the wireless mic can actually be used as a remote for the Pocket 3. Short press the power button on the transmitter to switch on and off noise reduction. And if you press the link button, you can actually start and stop recording, or you can take a picture. So it is actually possible to have the Pocket 3 record audio from the 3 inbuilt mics at the same time as capturing audio from connected wireless mics. And here's how. Swipe down and tap the settings cog. Scroll down to a setting called Built-in Mic Audio Backup. Tap it and then switch it on. Now when you record audio with a wireless mic connected, the main video file will contain the wireless audio. But the Pocket 3 will also save an extra file, a backup audio from the inbuilt mics. And so when you connect your Pocket 3 to a computer, you're going to find the video file, and you're also going to find this backup audio file as well.
So if you like the idea of watching my videos ad-free, you can think about joining us on Patreon. We've actually got a free level there, and you can watch a lot of my videos without ads, and you also get a text version. And if you want, you can think about joining the Video Creator Pro level. if you want to get the full courses, books, and podcasts and all kinds of other stuff. On that, see you next time.